Rancher found a wounded Bigfoot. Then the hunters came for his land. Episode 3. The forest was quiet until I found the blood. It wasn't human. The trail led me to the creek, and there it was, the same creature that once saved my life, now wounded, trembling beneath the pines. I should have run. Instead, I stayed. Its eyes met mine, not wild, not violent, just afraid. So I did the only thing that felt right. I helped. But mercy never stays hidden for long. By nightfall, the dogs were barking again. Torches flickered through the trees. The hunters had come not just for the beast, but for everything I called home. Sometimes the wild doesn't need taming. It just needs someone brave enough to stand beside it. Before we begin, take a moment to comment the name of your city. Where are you watching from tonight? And when the story ends, don't forget to rate it from 0 to 10. The dawn after the storm was quiet. Too quiet. Mist clung low over the ground, curling between the roots of tall pines like smoke. The air smelled of wet bark and iron. Every step James Harlo took sank into the mud with a soft squelch, his lantern trembling in his grip. Then he saw it, a dark trail cutting across the clearing, glistening under the pale light. Blood. Not from a man, not from any animal he knew. He followed it, breath held, until it led him to the creek. There, beneath a leaning pine, lay the impossible. Bigfoot. Its massive chest rose and fell in uneven gasps, fur soaked with rain and blood. James froze. The creature that once dragged a woman to safety now lay broken before him. His instincts screamed to run, but something deeper took hold. He knelt, tore his bandana from his neck, and pressed it against the wound. The giant stirred, but did not resist. Their eyes met through the mist, wild and human all at once. And in that fragile silence, fear turned into understanding. Part 1. The wound rain whispered through the holes in the barn roof, dripping in uneven rhythms that echoed through the empty space. The air smelled of hay iron and the sharp bite of whiskey. James Harlo moved carefully through the shadows, one hand steadying the heavy form of the wounded creature as he guided it to a bed of straw in the far corner. The lantern flickered weakly on a wooden beam, throwing trembling light across the scene. For the first time since dawn, James could see the wound clearly. A deep gash along Bigfoot's right shoulder, torn open by something sharp, maybe a bullet, maybe steel wire. Either way, the bleeding hadn't stopped. James swallowed hard. He'd stitched horses before, even patched up a man once long ago, but this was no man. Still, the sight of that injury burned away his hesitation. He grabbed a rag from an old crate, soaked it with whiskey, and pressed it against the wound. The creature shuddered, exhaling a low rumble that vibrated through the air. "It's all right," James muttered, his voice rough but steady. "I ain't here to hurt you." Outside, the wind rattled the barn doors, bringing with it the distant hum of thunder. James worked quietly, cleaning the wound with care, his fingers trembling from both fear and reverence. The creature's breathing slowed. Its enormous chest rose and fell like the rhythm of a great drum. Each exhale clouded the cold air, mixing with the smoke of the lantern. Then came the sound of soft footsteps behind him. James Clara's voice, faint, uncertain. "What's going on out here?" James froze, his hand still pressed against the wound. He turned slowly. Clara stood in the barn doorway, her figure framed by the pale drizzle outside. She wore his old coat over her nightdress hair, loose eyes wide. Her gaze followed the trail of blood across the floor and landed on the creature. Her breath caught. "My God," she whispered. James stood, moving between her and Bigfoot. "Stay back, Clara." She took a step forward anyway, voice trembling. "You're helping it." He hesitated, then nodded. "It helped us first." The words hung in the air like smoke. Clara's eyes darted between James and the creature, disbelief warring with something softer. Curiosity, maybe even pity. "He's hurt," James continued. "Shot, maybe. He came here bleeding. I couldn't just leave him." Clara's hands were shaking. She took another step, slow and cautious. The lantern light caught her face, pale, frightened but drawn by something she couldn't name. She knelt a few feet away, watching as Bigfoot shifted, a low groan rumbling from deep in its chest. I thought it was a monster," she whispered. "That night, I thought it wanted to kill me." James shook his head. "No, it was saving you." For a moment, the only sound was rain. Then Clara reached forward, trembling fingers brushing the air just above the creature's fur. It didn't move, didn't even flinch. Her hand hovered, then settled gently against its arm. The fur was coarse, soaked with blood and rain, but warm beneath her touch. The creature's breathing slowed, a deep rumble of contentment passing through its body like a sigh. Clara's eyes filled with tears. "It's not what I thought." James nodded, watching her. "None of this is." They stayed there like that for a long moment, two humans and a legend bound by quiet understanding. Outside, thunder rolled again, softer this time, as though the storm itself was listening. James reached for his stitching kit, a relic from his father's days as a ranch medic. His fingers moved with practiced precision, threading the needle by lantern light. "Hold that lamp steady," he said. Clara obeyed, her fear replaced by focus. Together they worked, she holding the light, he sewing each wound with slow, deliberate care. The creature's breath hitched occasionally, but it made no move to resist. When the final stitch was tied, James sat back, wiping sweat from his brow. "That's the best I can do," he murmured. Clara placed a hand on his shoulder. "You did good." A deep, resonant sound filled the barn, not quite a growl, not quite a sigh. Bigfoot raised its head slightly, eyes glinting amber in the dim light. It looked at James, then Clara, and something in its gaze felt unmistakably human. Gratitude. James felt his chest tighten. For a moment, the world outside, the rain, the silence, the fear fell away. Then came the sound that shattered the peace. Dogs, barking in the distance, faint but growing closer. The kind of sound every rancher knew, hunters on the move. Bigfoot stiffened. The low growl returned, not in pain this time, but warning. It shifted, trying to rise, but James pressed a hand to its shoulder. "Stay down," he whispered. Clara's face drained of color. "James, they're coming." He nodded grimly, standing to blow out the lantern. "Keep quiet. Don't move." Outside, the barking grew louder, echoing through the trees. James slipped to the window, peering out through the crack in the wood. Faint lights flickered between the pines' torches. Voices carried through the wind. "Tracks lead this way," someone shouted. "It's bleeding bad, must have holed up near the ranch." James's stomach twisted. He looked back at Clara, then at the creature crouched in the shadows. Bigfoot's eyes met his. There was no rage there, only understanding. James whispered more to himself than to anyone else. "You saved us once. Guess it's my turn now." He reached for his Winchester, checked the chamber, and pulled his coat tight. Rain drummed harder against the roof. Clara caught his arm. "If they see you with it, I know." His voice was steady. "But they won't touch this ranch. Not tonight." The creature shifted again, letting out a sound deep and soft that almost sounded like a word. James paused at the door, looking back one last time. The lantern light caught the curve of Bigfoot's face, tired, wounded, but alive. He nodded once. "Stay low. I'll draw them away." And with that, he stepped out into the storm. The door creaked shut behind him, leaving the barn bathed in darkness, save for the faint glimmer of amber eyes watching through the cracks. Inside, Clara pressed her hand to her chest, listening to the sound of barking fade into the distance and the low, steady breathing of the creature they had once called a monster. Outside, somewhere beyond the tree line, a rifle clicked. The night was far from over. Part 2. The hunter's return night fell heavy over the ranch. The last streaks of daylight drowned in mist, leaving only the restless hum of crickets and the distant whisper of trees. The fog thickened, swallowing the horizon whole, until the world seemed made of smoke and silence. James Harlo crouched by the cracks in the barn wall, his breath misting in the cold air. Through the narrow gap between the planks, he could see faint glimmers of light moving through the trees, torches weaving like fireflies in the dark. And voices, rough, loud, echoing between the trunks. "The beast's been wounded. It's near the ranch." Another voice answered, sharper, closer. "Tracks end here. Spread out." James's pulse quickened. He turned, signaling Clara to stay quiet. She nodded, clutching the lantern close to her chest, the flame barely flickering. In the corner, Bigfoot lay motionless on a bed of straw, its massive form hidden under a torn canvas sheet. Its breath came ragged, deep, and uneven, each exhale like a rumble buried beneath the floor. Outside, the sound of boots crunched against the wet soil. The hunters were moving along the fence line now, their shadows stretching long across the fog. James whispered, voice low and urgent, "Don't make a sound, not a single one." Clara nodded again, her lips trembling. She pressed her back against the wooden beam, eyes darting toward the door. Then came the dogs. Their barks cut through the night, sharp, wild, unrelenting. The sound grew louder, closer, until James could hear the scratch of claws against the dirt just outside the barn. One of the hounds sniffed at the base of the door, whining, then barked twice more. "Over here," a hunter shouted. James's heart slammed against his ribs. He raised a hand to Clara, "Stay still," and reached for his rifle. The door rattled once, then again. Muffled voices murmured on the other side. "You sure it's here? Fresh blood by the fence." Something big came through. The latch shivered. James's finger hovered near the trigger. Then a third voice, older, rougher, broke through. "Leave it. The thing's bleeding out somewhere. We'll find it by dawn." A pause. The men muttered, reluctant. The torchlight outside moved slowly across the barn door. Through the cracks, James saw the flicker of orange fire, felt the heat seeping through the slats. The beam of light stopped. For a breathless moment, it lingered right there, burning against the wood. James didn't move. Neither did Clara. Even the wind held its breath. The flame wavered, then shifted. The torch turned away. The footsteps receded, fading into the mist. James exhaled, the sound shaky and fragile. "They're moving east," he whispered. "For now." He lowered the rifle, turning back toward the creature. But what he saw made his chest tighten. Blood. Dark, fresh, pooling beneath the straw. Bigfoot's breathing had changed faster, uneven. Its chest heaved, each inhale sharp and strained. The stitches James had made were tearing loose, soaked through by new bleeding. "Damn it," he muttered. "Hold on." He grabbed the lantern and knelt beside the creature. Clara hurried over, hands trembling. "Is it bleeding again? Get me the rag, the one near the barrel." She moved quickly, pressing the cloth into his hand. James poured whiskey over the wound again. The creature jerked, a guttural sound escaping its throat, part growl, part groan. "Easy," James said. "I know it hurts." Clara knelt beside him, holding the lantern steady. The flickering light revealed the lines of exhaustion carved into James's face, the sweat glistening on his forehead. He pressed harder against the wound, whispering through gritted teeth, "You saved us once. You don't die here. Not on my land." The creature's eyes opened, dim, golden, reflecting the flame. It stared at him for a long time, its expression unreadable but strangely calm. Then it blinked, slow, deliberate, as if understanding. Outside, thunder grumbled across the hills. Clara whispered, "What if they come back?" "They will," James said, without hesitation. "But we'll be ready." He tied the cloth tighter, ignoring the sting of whiskey on his cut hands. The bleeding slowed. The creature's breathing steadied, still shallow but less frantic. Clara sat back, exhaling hard. "I never thought I'd see this day. You, me, and it." James gave a tired smile. Worlds full of surprises. For a while, the three of them sat in silence, man, woman, and myth, bound together by fear and strange, fragile trust. The storm outside had faded into drizzle, the soft hiss of rain like a lullaby over the old wood. Then faintly the sound returned. Boots. Closer this time. Clara stiffened. James cursed under his breath, dousing the lantern. Darkness swallowed them whole. The barn filled with shadows, cold, heavy, suffocating. James could see nothing but could hear everything, the squelch of mud, the murmur of men, the low whine of a dog sniffing near the walls. "Don't move," he whispered. Bigfoot's breathing slowed, almost imperceptible. A man's voice right outside, "Smell that blood and smoke. Someone's been tending a fire out here." Another voice, younger. "Think the rancher knows." A pause. Then, Every man in these woods knows something. The question is, what's he hiding? The words hit James like a stone. His jaw tightened. He pressed his shoulder against the door ready. But before anything else happened, a distant whistle pierced the air. "Hey, over here! We found something by the creek." The voices outside shifted, moving toward the sound. The dog barked once, twice, then followed. Silence returned. James waited a full minute before daring to breathe. He looked at Clara, her face pale, her eyes wide but steady. "They're gone," she whispered. "For now." He struck a match, relighting the lantern. The golden light returned warm and trembling. It revealed Bigfoot watching him not with fear, but something deeper. Respect. James knelt again, voice low. "You've got a fight in you yet, huh?" The creature made a low sound, not a growl, but a faint hum like acknowledgement. Outside, the fog rolled thick once more, concealing everything beyond the ranch fence. But somewhere in that darkness, the hunters were circling back their torches, dying down to embers. The night wasn't over. James knew it. He stood, shoulders heavy, eyes on the door. The world outside was closing in, not because of the monster hiding in his barn, but because of the men hunting it. And as he looked down at the creature's half-lidded eyes, he realized something chilling. For the first time in his life, he wasn't sure who the real monsters were anymore. Part 3. The Choice. The lantern flame flickered weakly, fighting against the darkness that pressed in from every crack of the barn. Rain had stopped, but the mist outside thickened until it looked like smoke crawling across the earth. The air smelled of wet hay, gun oil, and fear. James sat by the window slit, watching faint lights move again through the tree line. The hunters hadn't gone far. Their voices drifted through the fog like ghosts. He could make out fragments, orders, curses, the impatient shuffle of boots. "Its close blood trail leads right past his fence. If he's hiding it, we'll know soon enough." The words made his stomach knot. Behind him, the creature stirred. The sound of its breathing filled the small space, slow, heavy, but steadying. Each inhale a deep echo that vibrated through the wood floor. Clara sat beside it, hands folded tightly in her lap, eyes flicking toward James. He turned from the window, jaw set. He knew what was coming. He reached for his Winchester. The cold steel felt heavier tonight, as though it understood the weight of the choice ahead. He checked the chamber, one bullet left. Clara's voice broke the silence. "You can't fight them all." "I don't plan to," James said, sliding the rifle strap over his shoulder. She stood, crossing the dirt floor in 2 quick steps. "James, listen to me." Her hand caught his arm. "If they find it, if they see what's in here, they'll kill it. And you. Both of you." He looked at her eyes, dark and calm. "Then they'll have to go through me first." Her fingers tightened on his sleeve. "You'll die." "Maybe," he said softly, glancing back at the creature. "But I ain't hiding while someone else bleeds for me. Not again." There was something final in his tone, the kind of resolve forged from loneliness and loss. Clara saw it in his face, the quiet fire that no one could talk him out of. The creature stirred again, a low sound rumbling from its chest. Its eyes opened, glowing faintly amber in the dim light. It watched the 2 humans in silence, as if it understood every word. James crouched beside it, resting a hand against its arm. The skin beneath the thick fur was hot with fever. "You stay here," he said, voice low. "No noise, no movement. Let me handle this." The creature blinked once, slow, deliberate, and let out a faint sound, something between a growl and a sigh. James nodded. "That's good enough." He stood, pulled his coat tight, and opened the barn door just enough to slip out. The night hit him like a cold slap. Mist wrapped around his legs as he stepped into the open, his boots sinking into soft earth. Somewhere in the darkness, a branch cracked a hunter's footstep. He raised his rifle barrel, pointing toward the edge of the forest. "Who's out there?" he called. His voice carried through the fog, low but commanding. For a moment, nothing. Then a torch flared to life. Several silhouettes appeared through the mist. 5 men, rifles slung, coats dripping wet. Their faces were hard eyes, sharper than their blades. The man in front, older, grizzled, the one who led them, called back. "Evening, Harlo." Didn't expect to see you out here." "Could say the same," James replied. The man stepped closer, torchlight glinting off his wet beard. "We followed blood through your pasture. You seen anything strange?" James hesitated. "Coyotes, maybe. Nothing else." "Coyotes don't leave prints the size of barrels," the hunter said flatly. "We're tracking something big, mean. You'd best stay inside." James held his ground. "You fire guns near my fence again, and you'll be the one staying inside 6 feet under." The men shifted uneasily. Tension rippled through the fog like static. Then one of them, young, nervous, eager, raised his rifle. "He's hiding it," he said. "You can smell it. Blood whiskey smoke. It's in the barn." Clara, watching from inside through a crack, felt her heart stop. James's grip on the Winchester tightened. "You lower that gun, boy." But the hunter didn't move. "You're protecting it, aren't you?" he hissed. "That monster killed livestock, maybe worse. And you," the old man barked, "hold your fire." But it was too late. The young one's finger twitched. The world froze for a split second. A click. A deep, heavy sound followed not a gunshot, but a growl. Low, resonant. It came from behind James, from the barn itself. The ground seemed to tremble. Mist rippled as something massive moved in the shadows. The hunter's torches flared, lighting the fog, and there it was. Bigfoot. Weak, bleeding, but towering. The door behind James creaked open as the creature stepped out, its silhouette enormous against the pale fog. For a moment, time held its breath. The men stared, disbelief frozen on their faces. Their rifles wavered between man and beast. James turned slightly, lowering his weapon. "Stay back," he murmured over his shoulder. The creature didn't move. It just stood there, breathing heavily, eyes fixed on the hunters. The old man whispered, "Sweet mercy." Then the young hunter screamed, "It's right there, shoot." He raised his gun, but before he could fire, James stepped forward, blocking the line of sight. "Don't," he shouted. "It's not what you think. Move, Harlo." "No." His voice cracked the night like thunder. "It saved us. It's bleeding because of you." The words stopped them for half a heartbeat, long enough for Bigfoot to shift its stance, straightening despite the pain. Its growl deepened, a warning that shook the air. The old man barked an order. "Hold fire!" The young one's hands shook. "It's gonna charge." But it didn't. Bigfoot raised its head and let out a sound unlike anything human or animal. Low, mournful, ancient. It echoed through the valley like the voice of the earth itself. Even the hunters froze, torches flickering in the wind. James turned his head just enough to see the creature's eyes. "You don't have to fight," he whispered. "Not tonight." The creature blinked once. Then, in a single fluid motion, it stepped forward just enough to stand beside him. A man and a legend, shoulder to shoulder under the mist. The hunters didn't fire. They couldn't. Something about the sight, the wounded giant, the lone rancher defending it, broke through their fear and turned it into silence. The old hunter slowly lowered his torch. His voice trembled. "Let it go, boys." But I said, "Let it go." The torches dipped one by one. The rifles followed. The fog swallowed them as they turned back toward the forest. James stood there for a long moment, shoulders trembling, breath sharp in the cold air. The creature swayed beside him, steadying itself with a deep exhale. When the last light disappeared beyond the pines, he lowered his rifle. He turned, meeting the creature's gaze. "Guess we made our choice," he said quietly. The creature gave a slow, deliberate nod, and in that moment, James realized that somewhere between fear and courage, they had crossed a line no man could ever return from. Part 4. The Stand. The clearing burned with light and motion, torches waving through the fog, rifles flashing in the dark. Every shout, every echo bounced off the wet trees until the forest itself seemed alive, breathing with tension. James Harlo stood at the edge of his ranch, the world around him spinning between shadow and flame. His Winchester felt heavy in his grip, but he wasn't aiming to kill. He was aiming to hold back chaos. Bigfoot stood beside him, battered, bleeding, its chest rising and falling in thunderous rhythm. Mud streaked its fur, blood glistened across its arm, and yet it stood tall, unbroken. The hunters spread out in a half-circle, torches casting long, shaking shadows across the ground. "It's wounded. Take it down," someone shouted. The forest erupted. Gunfire cracked sharp and violent. The torches flared as bullets tore through branches and dirt. The creature roared a sound so deep it made the ground tremble. It slammed one enormous hand into the earth mud, and stones flew scattering the men. The blast of sound alone was enough to make the nearest hunter stumble backward, cursing. James raised his rifle high, waving it through the smoke. "Stop!" he bellowed, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Stop shooting! It's protecting this land!" But no one listened. Another volley of shots ripped through the night. One bullet struck the fence post beside him, splintering the old wood into his face. Another whistled past his shoulder. He ducked, heart hammering, and turned toward Bigfoot. "Go!" he shouted. "Get to the tree line!" The creature didn't move, its golden eyes fixed on him as if refusing to leave. "Go!" James roared again, but Bigfoot only let out a low growl, turning instead toward the hunters. It beat its chest once, the sound echoing like a drum through the valley. Then it stepped forward. Each stride was deliberate, shaking the ground. Its massive hand swung out, striking the soil so hard it sent a wave of mud flying, drenching the men's boots and extinguishing 2 torches. The hunters shouted in confusion, stumbling backward. One of them, the young one from before, panicked. He raised his rifle. "Shoot it!" Now James turned, just as the barrel flashed. The shot rang out and fire bloomed in his arm. He staggered, clutching the wound. The pain came sharp and hot, knocking the breath out of him. Blood seeped through his sleeve, warm against the cold air. Clara's voice screamed from somewhere behind. She had run from the barn, her lantern slicing through the fog like a star. He fell to one knee but refused to drop the rifle. His vision blurred, the world spinning between firelight and mist. Bigfoot let out a deafening roar that rattled the earth. The hunters froze as the creature surged forward, grabbing a massive fallen log with one hand. It swung the trunk in a single motion, slamming it down across the clearing. The log crashed into the mud, blocking the men's path completely. The ground shook. Birds scattered from the trees in a flurry of wings. The hunters panicked. "Fall back," someone shouted. "Fall back." But Bigfoot wasn't attacking. It stood there, breathing hard, chest heaving, guarding the wounded man behind it. The firelight caught in its eyes, turning them into twin embers of defiance. James struggled to his feet, his arm bleeding freely. "Stop!" he shouted again, voice raw. "It's not your enemy!" The old hunter, the one with the grizzled beard, hesitated. He looked from James to the creature, to the chaos around them, and for the first time doubt flickered across his weathered face. Bigfoot's breathing slowed. It turned slightly, as if checking that James was still alive. Clara ran to him, dropping to her knees. "You're hit! I'm fine!" he lied, gritting his teeth. "Stay back!" The old hunter lowered his rifle. "What in God's name are we looking at?" he muttered. "Something that doesn't deserve to die," James answered, voice hoarse. Bigfoot turned its gaze on the men. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, it reached down its massive hand, pressing gently against the broken fence that separated the ranch from the forest. The gesture was calm, almost sacred. The hunters stared, silent. The creature's hand lingered on the fence for a long moment, palm flat against the splintered wood, as if to mend it, to restore the border between the 2 worlds. Then it looked back at James one last time. Their eyes met. No words, no sound. Just understanding. The creature took one step backward, then another. "Wait," James murmured, staggering forward. "You don't have to." But before he could finish, Bigfoot turned toward the mist. The fog rolled thicker now, swallowing the clearing. The torches sputtered, their light dimming as the air grew damp and heavy. Within seconds, the creature's form blurred, first its legs, then its shoulders, until only the faint glint of its eyes remained. And then it was gone. Silence fell like a curtain. The only sounds were the dripping rain and the heavy breathing of men who didn't know what they'd just witnessed. The old hunter lowered his rifle completely. "Let's go," he said quietly. "Whatever that thing is, it ain't ours to kill." The others hesitated, but no one argued. They turned one by one, their torches disappearing into the mist. Clara pressed her hands to James's wound, her eyes glistening. "It saved you," she whispered. He nodded weakly, watching the last traces of movement vanish beyond the fence. "Yeah," he said softly. "Guess we saved each other." The rain began again, light, cold, steady. He looked down at the fence where the creature had placed its hand. The wood, though cracked and splintered, looked different now, as if the earth itself had closed the wound. James staggered toward it, pressing his own bloodied hand to the same spot. The mud was cool beneath his palm. "This land's not just mine anymore," he murmured. "It never was." Clara helped him back toward the barn, her shoulder beneath his. Behind them, the fog glowed faintly orange, the last torch dying out. The night, once filled with chaos, settled into a quiet peace. Somewhere in the distance, a single low howl echoed through the valley, neither beast nor man, but something between. James looked toward the sound, his eyes soft but fierce. For the first time, he didn't feel alone. He whispered into the mist, voice trembling with exhaustion and awe. "You're not the monster, are you? You're the shield." And as the first light of dawn began to rise, it felt as though the forest itself nodded back. Part 5. The farewell dawn came soft and slow, as if the world itself was afraid to wake. A pale light spilled across the valley, brushing over the wet grass, the broken fence, and the footprints that led nowhere. The storm had passed. The land had gone still, the kind of silence that felt sacred, like the earth was holding its breath. James Harlo stepped out from the cabin, his boots sinking into the damp soil. The cold air stung his lungs, but it was clean, alive. The sleeve of his shirt was still torn and dark with dried blood, the wound beneath it bandaged in a hurry. Clara stood in the doorway, her arms crossed for warmth, watching him with quiet eyes. "You shouldn't be walking," she said softly. He didn't answer. His gaze was fixed on the edge of the woods, where the mist still clung to the ground like memory. Each step he took was careful, deliberate, until he stood beneath the tall pines, the same place where he'd found Bigfoot bleeding 2 nights ago. What he saw stopped him cold. There at the base of the largest pine lay a circle of stones, perfectly arranged, smooth and deliberate, the kind of precision that nature didn't make by accident. In the center rested a small tuft of coarse brown fur, still damp with dew, and beside it a strip of bark etched with faint, jagged marks. James knelt slowly, his knees creaking against the wet ground. He touched one of the stones. It was cold, almost humming with the chill of dawn. The fur glistened in the light. He didn't need words to understand. It wasn't a grave. It wasn't a warning. It was a message. Gratitude. The creature was gone, but what it left behind spoke louder than any roar ever could. James swallowed hard, a lump rising in his throat. His fingers brushed the fur gently, then curled around the piece of bark. The lines carved into it were rough, but patterned like a mark, a memory, a promise. Behind him, Clara approached quietly, her footsteps soft on the damp earth. She stopped beside him, eyes wide at the sight. "What is it?" she whispered. James exhaled his breath, visible in the morning chill. "A thank you, maybe," he said. "Or maybe a farewell." Clara knelt beside him, tracing her fingers along the edge of the stone circle. "It's beautiful," she murmured, like it knew what it was doing. He nodded, staring into the mist that lingered between the trees. "Yeah," he said quietly. "It knew." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The forest was calm. No echoes of thunder, no barking dogs, no shouts of hunters. Only the sound of a gentle wind weaving through the branches, carrying the scent of pine and rain. James rose slowly to his feet, his body stiff but steady. The pain in his arm pulsed like a dull heartbeat, but he didn't care. His eyes stayed fixed on the fog that still hovered beyond the tree line. He could feel it, something out there watching. Not near, but not gone either. He took a deep breath and spoke softly, as though the forest itself were listening. "Guess we both just wanted peace, didn't we?" The wind shifted. The mist swirled, parting slightly between the trees. For a moment, barely more than a heartbeat, he saw it, a shape in the fog, massive, still. The outline of shoulders broader than any man's, a head bowed slightly, eyes glinting faint gold through the white. Bigfoot. It didn't move forward this time, didn't roar or hide. It simply stood there watching. Then slowly it nodded once deep and certain before turning away. The mist closed behind it, swallowing the figure until nothing remained but silence. James stood there for a long time, the morning sun rising behind him, light spilling through the thinning fog. The forest seemed different now, not wild, not dangerous, but alive in a way he'd never noticed before. Clara touched his arm gently. "Do you think it'll come back?" He smiled faintly, eyes still on the trees. "No," he said. "It doesn't need to." They turned back toward the cabin together, the wind at their backs. As they walked, James looked once more over his shoulder at the circle of stones beneath the pine. The sunlight caught on the fur and bark, making them shimmer faintly, a final silent goodbye. For the first time in years, James didn't feel alone on his land. He felt connected to the forest, to the creature, to something bigger than either world could explain. He whispered more to himself than to anyone else. Maybe peace isn't found in being alone. Maybe it's in understanding what's been beside you all along. And as the last of the fog lifted, the ranch stood bathed in gold, quiet, whole, and finally, at peace. The cabin was quiet, bathed in the soft gold of morning. The storm, the gunfire, the shouting, all of it had faded into the kind of stillness that only comes after something sacred. The smell of coffee lingered in the air, mixing with the faint scent of pine that drifted through the open window. Clara slept soundly on the couch, the lines of fear finally gone from her face. Outside, the birds were singing again, cautious at first, then confident, as if testing the peace. James sat by the window, an old leather-bound notebook resting on his knee. His right arm was still bandaged, but his hand moved steadily across the page. He wrote, "The forest isn't cruel. It just waits for someone to listen." He paused, reading the words back to himself. They felt right. True. He looked up. Sunlight spilled across the field, touching both the fence and the edge of the forest. The boundary between man and wild, no longer a line, but a meeting place. James smiled faintly, closing the notebook. The man who had once feared the unknown now found peace in it. The silence no longer haunted him. It healed him. Outside, a breeze stirred the trees, whispering through the branches like a voice carried from somewhere deeper in the woods. He listened, and this time he understood. Sometimes, he said softly, the things we fear the most are the ones that teach us how to feel again. The screen fades to black. This is Rancher Wild West Stories, where mystery meets mercy and every silence heals. If a legendary creature returned to protect your land, what would you do? Leave your answer below and rate today's story from 0 to 10.